Thank you, Debbie. I was reminded of what Marketplace Connections is all about while in Spokane this last week. I was coming back on the airplane with John Taylor on Wednesday. I was sitting next to a guy. You know how you get on an airplane sometimes and you just want to veg and you don't want to talk to anybody? Well, I was kind of in one of those moods, but he initiated a conversation. So we got to chatting. He had moved to Spokane about 3 weeks ago. He has fallen in love with Spokane. So I started asking him a bunch of questions why, and he said the educational system is excellent, the people are friendly, the schools are good, I can do business over here. And when I got home, I thought, that's in part, I think, what we're trying to do in Marketplace Connections. And our mission statement says, we create environments of grace, truth, and love so people take next steps on their spiritual journey. And I thought, this guy discovered an environment in Spokane that he absolutely loves. So our hope is that we can live up to that and create that kind of an environment, and that you will take next steps on your spiritual journey. I get the privilege to introduce my good friend, Kirk Anderson. Kirk is the managing principal with Action Point. Kirk has spoken for us a number of times in Bellevue, and I thought, we got to get this guy up to Edmonds. Every time Kirk speaks on leadership development within companies, their leadership, the bar of leadership rises and people really get trained. The only blemish on Kirk's record. I read through his resume. I won't read you everything. He's been involved in Rotary. He's gone to the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, the Executive Development Program. And he has the same problem that John Taylor has. Washington State University. Please.
I didn't know you were going to do that. I'd have worn the school colors today.
Can we welcome a cougar to the podium?
The things that I'm going to be talking about today can apply not just in your business, but they can apply in your personal life as well. So it's kind of fractal in terms of, the scale of how these things apply can be personally and professionally. So when John called and asked me to talk, he said that the theme was, creating a culture of excellence in your organization. So I got to thinking that really kind of resonated for me, because a lot of the work that my partner and I do in organizations is help them do just that. But the problem around it is that oftentimes people don't know what it is. And so I guess this is illustrated by a conversation that we had with a senior leader, senior VP in a Fortune 100 company not that long ago. And he called us in, and we'd been doing some work with them, and he goes, I'm just really frustrated. My people need to become more courageous. I need you to make my people more courageous. We go, well, that's a problem. He goes, why is that a problem? Because we don't know where the courage store is. Do you think you just go down to the courage store and buy 5-gallon buckets of courage and then feed it to everybody and problem solved? So what we said to him was, what does courage look like? What do you want your people doing differently that would have you say that my people are more courageous? And you know what? He couldn't answer the question. This is the problem we see around what I'll call the excellence bandwagon. All right? Who in the room, if somebody said, do you want to enhance excellence in your organization, wouldn't raise your hand, right? We all would. Well, of course I want that. Really? Do you really want it? Do you know what you're saying yes to? Do you have any idea what it costs to produce it? Do you really have the commitment to sustain what it takes to keep it going in your organization? You see, a lot of times we put the labels of good and bad on things, okay, and that traps us. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look into this a little bit. We only got 30 minutes, so we're not going to go too deep. But I hope that I get you thinking a little bit around some of these things. So let's start with culture. If we're going to be creating a culture of excellence, what's culture? Any ideas? What's culture? Come on, come on. I know you just ate, but it's okay to talk.
A friend of mine said it's the way we do things around here.
Okay, the way we do things around here. What else? What's culture?
It's what makes something, a group of people unique.
Okay, great. You notice they're different? I want to point this out, okay? Because how many times do people in organizations stand up in front of a room of people and say, we want to do this with our culture? Or culture is important. And everybody goes, yeah, that's important. Everybody's nodding. But you know what? People aren't clear on what the heck they're nodding about. Okay? We think we're in agreement, but we don't know if we're in agreement or not. So what happens in that kind of an environment is once you get to the action, what happens? Well, Pat goes off over there and John goes off over there, and then the leader goes, well, wait a minute. That's not what we're committed to. Why is the leader saying that? Because they had a whole different idea about what it was. Do you see? What is culture? I'd suggest to you that culture is the conversations that you and others in your organization are swimming in. A fish swims in water. Do you think the fish knows it's in water? How conscious are you of the air that you breathe? It's just there, right? Culture, and we're going to talk about the importance of conversations. Culture is the conversations you're swimming in. So if that's what it is, how do you create it and how do you maintain it? Let's take a look at something. What we would suggest to you is that there really are two things that you have available to you at any point in time to manage: conversations and other action. That's it. When I say other action, what am I talking about? Well, we do a lot of work with neurophysiologists, the brain scientists people. Okay? And one of the things that they've helped us see and understand is that when it comes to human action, all that ever happens is we move our body, right? We use our senses. And we have conversations with ourselves and others continuously. Even when you're sleeping, your brain's still active. Okay, that's a conversation. Okay? You're having with yourself in your brain, talking to your body. Okay? So, I've been to business school. A lot of you have been to business school. What they teach in business school is that when it comes to managing things, there's 3 classes of resources. And you see them up here on the screen. Then they tell us that the job of the leader is to manage those resources, right? To produce desired outcomes. Anybody disagree with that? Pretty standard, right? Kind of what we're taught. So if you look up management and what is it to manage something, you look in the business literature, the textbooks and all that kind of stuff, even the dictionary, what you're going to find is to manage is to direct, control, administer, or regulate something. Everybody agree? Makes sense, right? So, as the manager, you're fresh out of business school, you go into the company and what do you start to do? What you think you're there to do. I'm here to manage physical, financial, and human resources. Let me ask you a question. Do you like being directed, controlled, administered, or regulated? See the problem? Okay? That's still being taught in business schools today. Okay? But it's wrong. Okay? It's wrong. One reason it's wrong is that none of us in this room are resources. Doesn't mean we can't be resourceful. In fact, there's nothing that can be more resourceful than a human being. But the problem is, when you see a human being as a resource, When we see something as a resource, our subconscious brain is 1,000,000 times more powerful in its processing capability than the conscious part of your brain. Think about that. So, which part of your brain is going to win out, do you think, most of the time? Brain scientists tell us that human beings operate from their subconscious over 95% of the time. Have you ever driven to work and then got out of your car and sat at your desk and go, I have no memory of getting here? How did you do that? Your subconscious did that. Okay? It's not like we have a little flag that goes up that says, whoa, hold on, subconscious is now in control. No, it's not distinct for us, unless you choose to make it distinct. That's really important. Think about this for a moment. What can your subconscious brain do? It can only repeat the past. That's all it can do. It knows what it knows from your past experience and the agreements that you've made with yourself about what your experiences mean. That's all your subconscious can do. So you see something in the world, your subconscious goes, I know what that is, here it is, boom. And you go, yeah, that's the truth. And you go right down the road with your action. Right? Don't even think about it, because why? It's right there, and you know it's true. How do you know it's true? Well, because that's my experience. I lived it, I felt it. Don't tell me that's not true, right? But most of the time it's not true. Why do I say that? Because we can all go outside and stand at an intersection and watch things, come back in here, have people interview us, and none of our perceptions are going to agree. So what's the truth? Right? Is it Dan's truth? Is it my truth? Is it John's truth? It's like a puzzle, like a picture puzzle, right? Each person alive has a piece of that puzzle. But what do we do most of the time? We argue with each other over what's on our puzzle pieces. Instead of going up to each other and going, hey, Dan, look what's on this piece. What's on yours? Do our pieces fit together? Let's go find somebody where we fit with. Think of what we could learn if we did that. Do we do that? No. We don't. Huge costs to that. I got ahead of myself. Look at that. Let's take a look at the power of conversations for a moment. These are some operating assumptions that come out of some research by a guy by the name of James O'Toole. And we've been looking at this for a while. And then I got a book by a guy by the name of Daniel Coyle, which I'd highly recommend to any of you. I don't know if anybody in here has read it. It's called The Talent Code. The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. Daniel refers to the same research in his book. So I was going to go through that, I'm leafing through the book, and I go, oh yeah, look at that. So I bought the book. Glad I did. Daniel's got some good stuff in there. But the interesting thing is James O'Toole, back in the 1970s, fresh out of graduate school, started following around the leaders of General Motors. And his idea was to find out, well, what's the culture? These are the conversations that the people were swimming in at General Motors in the 1970s. I mean, look at these. GM is in the business of making money, not cars. Fascinating. The U.S. car market will always be isolated from the rest of the world. Yeah, we laugh today, but people got fired for not believing this stuff. People's careers stalled if they didn't buy into this. Right? Foreign competition will never get more than 15% of the U.S. market. It's over 80% today. Energy will always be cheap and abundant. Right? Thank God gas prices are down. Holy cow. Workers do not have important impact on production or product quality. Well, didn't they? Managers should only be developed from the inside. Hey, we don't want anything spoiling what we got here, right? So let's just keep this all in the family. Okay? What does incest do to the gene pool? Right? After a while, it's not very pretty. See, the conversations that you have in your organization, but the conversations you have with yourself in your own mind, okay, that's what you've got to pay attention to. That's what you have to manage, not other people. You get control of managing those conversations in your internal world. You have control of what follows, which is your action. When you have control of your action, guess what? You have the ability to produce results that you're aiming at with intention at a level that you heretofore maybe have never experienced. Why? Because back to the 95.5% of the time that you're operating in your subconscious, if you do the math, it's only 2 hours a week of a 40-hour work week that you're operating from your frontal cortex. That's where that's your creative center. That's where all your innovation comes from. That's where your logic values center is, operating from your values. It comes from the frontal cortex. It doesn't come from the limbic brain. But we like to be right, don't we? We like to know. Right? And that leverages right into excellence. What is it? What is it? Well, you know what? Excellence is not monolithic. It's dynamic. It's exceedingly dynamic. But you know what? If you don't take the time to define it, what hope do you have of ever reaching it? I do career development in addition to the work that my partner and I do with organizations. Some of the shortest conversations I've ever had with anybody have been, tell me about your competence. People start talking about all kinds of crap. Okay? None of it has to do with their competence. The competence part is usually 10 to 15 seconds. I've timed it. Okay? And then we go off into the context. Okay? Competence isn't one thing. It's 5 things. We're not going to go down that rabbit trail. But it's your skills. It's your knowledge. It's your experience. It's your natural talents. And it's this thing called your track record. Every one of those 5 things are different. And if you don't have the ability to articulate about yourself in those 5 areas, guess what? You sit down in front of an employer and you're just ready to commit interview suicide. I see that happening all the time. All the time. Here's where we get stuck, right? Because as I said before, we want to look good. Who here gets up in the morning and says, I can't wait to go show them up just how bad I am. Just how I suck at doing this. I just can't wait. No, we don't do that. We want to show people how good we are. Nothing wrong with that. But if being excellent means something other than looking good, do you see the problem? How could excellent mean something other than looking good? I'm getting to that. This is the traditional paradigm, right? We have a goal. We're here. What do? We're good at drawing lines, right? We just draw a straight line and we go, yeah, that's our plan, right? How many times has your manager said to you, work the plan? Just work the plan. Or get back on plan, right? Well, you know what? That's not real. That's not real life. Plans are not like fine wine, folks. They don't age well. All right? The moment you put a plan together, okay, you better start you better start developing the competence of planning, because your plan is going to start to be worthless. But what do? No, we measure success by the standard deviation off the straight line. Right? And what do? The middle of an here's the thing. I was just talking with a client on this the other day. Telecommunications company who's just blowing the socks off of the market. And very entrepreneurial. You know, they've been in business like 2.5 years. They got bought by a big company. And now the organization's starting to break. Right? Why is it breaking? Because now they've hired in the last year about 80 people. I didn't have lunch today. Why? Because I'm kind of fat around the middle. Okay, I got some extra baggage here. I got to get rid of it. Okay, when organizations get a middle, watch out. Because the middle knows that, you know what, I'm not down here doing the work on a day-to-day basis, and I'm not one of the owners or one of the senior leaders. Why am I really here? I've really got to kind of show people that I'm worthwhile keeping around. That's the part of the organization that we find is in the most survival. Because they're in the middle. Okay, and when you're in survival, what part of the brain is working? The limbic brain. It's not you, okay? It's all of us. It's me, okay? We all do this. Why? Because our biology is just obeying the laws of physics. Plain and simple. Don't punish yourself for it. Okay? You can't get away from it. I don't care how good you are. I teach this stuff. I still suck at this sometimes. Okay? Why? Because it's hard. It just is. It's just hard to go, oh crap, wait a minute, I'm in survival. You know, I'm sorry. Let's start over. Okay? You got to be willing to do that. Why? Because life's like that. That's what's real. You ever heard the expression, get real? Right? Well, if you want to get real, stop living there and start living here. That's what's real. So, when you're doing this, you got to manage the conversations, right? We had the conversation around the table talk question. And, what I found very compelling and moving was listening to the conversations people related around their struggles. Okay? What does it take to be in the midst of struggle and persevere? What do you really have to manage? It's your self-talk, right? If you give up, where are you? I just might as well dig my own grave and lay down, right? Well, if that's what you want to do, you can do that. You have the authority, the ability to choose, and the power, the ability to act. You always have those two things. God didn't leave us as orphans. There's no victims in the human family. Okay? There's only choices. Okay? So what will you choose to do? What will you choose to believe? What agreements will you make with yourself in any moment and now? Because you know what? Those agreements form your beliefs. That forms a three-dimensional biological structure in your brain, in your subconscious, that the next time you confront something like that, it pops up and you go, that's the truth, and you're on your way. Okay? If you don't intervene, you will continually repeat your past. This is a struggle. Right? Why did God make it that way? Yeah, it's kind of here you got this being that's all powerful, all knowing, and what does he do? Lets us struggle. Why? Because it's good for us. Because he doesn't want people dependent all of the time. He wants to co-create with us, guys. We're partners with him in what we bring forward in every moment of now. And there's tremendous grace in every moment, because guess what? Past no longer exists. Unless what? Unless you bring it with you. And you get to choose. All right? Struggle is a biological necessity. This is where Daniel Coyle's book comes into play. In a very interesting study, which, again, my partner and I were aware of this study before I got Daniel's book. I really like Daniel. It's a great book. Never met the guy, but when I'm reading his book, I'm going, yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, yeah, that's great. It's a great book. Where do our attitudes towards struggle come from? Well, Jim Stiegler and James Hebert, back in 1995, it's a long-term study, it's still going on. They basically took a look at middle school environments in Japan and the US, and they contrasted them. What did they find out? They found that Japanese students spend 44% of their class time in struggle. American students, less than 1%. Why? Well, because the teachers saw struggle as a sign of failure. Does that ring home for anybody? Sure did for me. In our culture, we've made an agreement, and it's stored in our subconscious, that when we're struggling, we're somehow failing. If you look at your biology, that's not what's written into your biology. What's written into your biology is something completely different. Who made your biology? God did. Okay? So there's something there we got to pay attention to. What is it? Fascinating thing. All right? Did you know that every synaptic circuit in your brain can increase its efficiency over 3,000 times? 3,000 times! How do you do that? It's what Daniel Coyle calls deep practice. You get in and you try something, you fail at it, okay? And you go, okay, that's no good. It's like my cousin was a professional soccer player, and I'd see him with the soccer ball all the time. He broke down the moves, right? And then for a week, he'd be doing just this with a soccer ball. I'm going, dude, knock it off, driving me nuts. He's like, no, I got to do this. What was he doing? He's firing that pattern of neurons with every movement of his body. And you know what? His body's getting better and better and better and better at it every time he does it. Okay? Because the circuit gets insulated. The brain insulates the circuit. The more you insulate a circuit, the more the bandwidth grows in the circuit. It's written into our biology. We can get better. We don't have to stay where we are. I think that's pretty cool. So, when you take a look at this thing of the straight line, managing for perfection or managing for excellence, do you really believe that your people can get better? Okay? Do you have the courage to let your people get better? Because what will happen? It won't be pretty in the beginning. We have an attention deficit disorder in our culture around performance. We think that it's got to be instant. That's not real, folks. Our biology doesn't work that way. And before we got all wrapped up in all these beliefs that things have to be instant, even our economy didn't work that way. Okay? You take an electric motor and you run it at full load above the load curve for too long, what's going to happen to the motor? It will burn out. It will burn out. You got a motor that could last 50 years or 150 years, and you can burn it out in 7. That's what we're doing. Is that excellence? Is that really what excellence is? All depends on what you define it to be, isn't it? Because what you agree with it with is what you're going to run after. We go into organizations, big companies, Fortune 100, 500, Fortune 1000 companies, as well as small companies you've never heard of. Organizations are broken today. They're broken. Because everybody's running after, these false models, these false expectations that aren't real. Is that excellence? Well, you might be producing double-digit returns for the last 10 years, but how long does the motor have left? Okay? A big part of it, again, it's all of our language. Just a little thing to illustrate something to you here. At risk or at stake. Let's say that we're going to go climb Mount Rainier. Your goal was to be here so we can have a summit push for the next day, but we start slogging our way up these pumice hills and we find that we take one step and we slide down half a step. Another step, slide back another half a step. So, we're just tiring ourselves out and it takes all day. And as the sun is setting, we're not there, we're here. Where should we be? Where should we be? Anybody?
Right where we are.
Yes, thank you. Given history, we are where we are. Okay? All those intentions don't really matter in terms of getting you to where you want to be. Okay? When you use the word should, man, you will immediately pull somebody into the limbic brain. Immediately. How many times have you heard this? Oh, you should think about doing it this way. You've lost them right there. Gone. What could you say? Is there another possible way you could do that and get even better results? Do you see the difference? Declaration coming from, well, I know, right? Who says you know? You only know what you know. You're one puzzle piece. All right? Ask a question. Look in the Bible. I find it fascinating that start with Genesis. Here's Adam and Eve in the garden, having a great old time. All of a sudden, big problem, right? Disobedience. Here comes God walking through the garden. What's the first thing he says? Where are you? Do you think that he didn't know where they are? Do you think he was lost in his own garden? Hey, where are you? Question. Followed by another question. God always asks a question. Even Jesus coming to heal people. What can I do for you? Why did he do that? I think one reason is because God is love, and love never forces itself on anybody. Not even to heal them. So, excellence. Are you trying to force it down your organization's throat? Are you trying to force it down your own throat? By telling yourself what you should do or what you should be? There's a cost to that. There's a real cost to that. And it may not show up for years. But it's a huge cost. I will send this, because we're running a little short on time, I will send this to John, and you all can have a PDF of the deck with the stuff in it. But here's the thing, here's a picture I want to send you off with, is, remember, that's real. But I can't tell you how many times in my own career in running organizations and in helping other organizations, sometimes they set a goal and they, through learning, they go, that's not where we need to be. We really want to be here. But if your organization is all tied up and looking good, are people going to speak up and say, oh, wait a minute, that's crap. We can do better here. The middle of the organization rarely does that. Why? Because, well, that's the CEO's pet project. Case from my own life. Very briefly. I was sent by the CEO, Fisher Communications. Okay, I spent over 20 years in that company doing a variety of different things. I was CEO of all the non-broadcast operations for the company before I left. I was sent down to help our broadcasting station, Channel 4 and the radio stations, co-locate because they were in different spots. The broadcasting management wanted to spend $63 million on a renovation that basically, when you really looked at it, it wouldn't give the stations, in my opinion, what they needed going forward. The station management couldn't answer the question, what's our strategy for moving to digital? They didn't have an answer for that. Okay, long story short is I went back to the CEO and I said, I think spending $63 million not to move the value needle is a big mistake. I think we need to monetize the facility expenditure. We got a real estate company in here. Let's build a building that we can basically, if we do it right, I think we can live rent-free and make our cost of capital by renting the rest of the space. You know what he said to me? He took his face, he did this. You know, when the CEO steps at you and gets their finger out in your face, that doesn't feel good. He said, don't even think about it. We can't afford that. 6 months later, he was standing right by my side while we were presenting to the board how that is exactly what we needed to do. What changed? He did. But if I didn't have the courage to stand up at the right time, okay, that moment that he's all emotionally involved is not the right time to argue with him. Okay? So you pick it, you pick your time, you pick your battle, but you've got to do that. You've got to build that ability in yourself and in your organizations for your people to do that. Because if not, and if you're the owner and you're the CEO, guess what? You're underinformed. And when you're underinformed, you don't have the information you need to make good decisions. That's a huge problem. Okay? So, again, excellence. It's a big investment. It's a big investment. You got to be willing to develop your people and yourself. You got to be willing to step back and slow down a little bit. Be clear on what you're looking for. Be clear on who's being served. What I mean by that is don't put your focus on your company and on yourself. Your focus as a business, you exist for two things: to meet needs and solve problems for other people. Never forget that. You forget that at your peril. Thank you.